Hello, I'm Sebastian. Welcome to Nine Nar Trees podcast. Today, I will summarize and review the book. The Whiteness of Wealth by legal scholar Dorothy A. Brown examines how seemingly neutral tax rules can deepen racial inequality in the United States. Rather than focusing only on overt discrimination, Brown connects everyday tax provisions to the lived financial realities of Black Americans, arguing that the system often rewards patterns of wealth and family structure more common among white households. Using publicly discussed examples such as homeownership incentives, retirement savings advantages, marriage-related rules, and capital gains treatment, she shows how policy design can amplify gaps created by history and by current market discrimination. The book also explores the emotional and social costs of these outcomes, including the pressure to provide support within extended families and the limited upside of traditional wealth-building strategies when access to opportunity is unequal. Importantly, Brown frames the issue as fixable. By changing tax priorities, strengthening enforcement, and measuring outcomes through a racial equity lens, lawmakers can build a tax system that supports broad-based prosperity. I will give you key takeaways from this book. Firstly, a tax code built around white wealth patterns. Brown argues that the tax system is not simply a way to raise revenue, but a set of incentives that reflect assumptions about how a typical household earns, saves, and invests. Many core benefits flow to people who already have assets, stable access to credit, and jobs that provide workplace benefits. Because historic and ongoing discrimination has limited Black wealth accumulation, tax preferences tied to ownership and investment tend to advantage those who already resemble the system's default household profile. She highlights how deductions, exclusions, and preferential rates are often structured around behaviors like buying homes in appreciating neighborhoods, holding stocks for long periods, and maximizing tax-advantaged retirement accounts. When those pathways are harder to access, the tax code can appear race-neutral while still producing racially uneven outcomes. The book encourages readers to see inequality as embedded in policy design, not merely the result of individual choices. This framing shifts the debate from blaming communities to examining structural inputs, what the government subsidizes, which households can realistically claim those subsidies, and how policy could be redesigned so that benefits do not depend on already having wealth. Secondly, housing incentives and the unequal payoff of homeownership. A major theme is how tax benefits tied to housing can magnify disparities. The tax code has long favored homeownership through mechanisms such as mortgage-related advantages and the favorable treatment of gains on a primary residence. But those benefits are most valuable when homes appreciate and when owners have enough income to itemize or otherwise meaningfully benefit. Brown connects this to patterns of residential segregation, appraisal gaps, and unequal access to high-opportunity neighborhoods, all of which can depress appreciation for Black homeowners even when they do everything that traditional financial advice recommends. If a home does not gain much value, the wealth-building payoff shrinks, and the associated tax advantages become smaller as well. The result is a double bind. Homeownership is promoted as the primary middle-class asset, yet the market and policy environment can make that asset a weaker engine of wealth for Black families. Brown uses this area to illustrate a broader point about tax policy. When benefits rely on market outcomes shaped by discrimination, the state ends up subsidizing unequal returns. Reform, in her view, must consider both access and the quality of returns. Thirdly, marriage, family support, and hidden tax penalties. Brown explores how household structure and caregiving expectations interact with tax rules in ways that can disadvantage Black Americans. The tax code includes provisions that reward certain marital and income patterns, but these rules can create penalties depending on how earnings are distributed between partners and how benefits are claimed. She connects this to demographic and economic realities, including wage gaps, employment instability driven by discrimination, and the responsibility many Black households feel to provide financial support to extended family members. That support often does not fit neatly into tax definitions of dependence or deductible expenses, even though it is a real and recurring obligation that affects saving and investing capacity. Brown's argument is not that families should change their values to match the tax code. It is that policy should reflect how people actually live and how resources flow in communities. By tracing the mismatch between legal categories and social reality, she shows how a system can impose extra costs without ever stating a racial purpose. Her analysis pushes readers to ask which families the tax code assumes and which families it overlooks. Fourthly, work, benefits, and the uneven access to tax-favored savings. The book also highlights how many of the most powerful wealth-building tax breaks are tied to employment arrangements that are not evenly distributed. Tax-advantaged retirement accounts, employer matches, and certain fringe benefits deliver major long-term value, but they presuppose stable jobs with benefits and enough disposable income to contribute. Brown connects unequal access to these opportunities to labor market discrimination and occupational segregation, which can place Black workers in roles with fewer benefits, more volatility, and less upward mobility. Even when a worker has access, lower wages and greater family obligations can limit contributions, reducing the compounding advantage that tax-favored savings provide. She uses this to challenge the common narrative that financial outcomes are mainly a function of personal discipline. Instead, she emphasizes the policy environment that rewards those already positioned to save. Her approach implies that closing racial wealth gaps requires more than encouraging budgeting. It requires examining how tax incentives are delivered and whether they reach people who need them most. Reform options include rethinking how savings incentives are structured and broadening their reach beyond traditional employer pipelines. Lastly, paths to repair, equity-focused tax reform, and accountability. Brown does not treat inequity as inevitable. She argues for changes that would make tax policy a tool for narrowing, rather than widening, racial wealth gaps. A key idea is to evaluate provisions by outcomes, asking who actually benefits and how strongly, rather than assuming neutrality because the language is race-blind. She advocates shifting subsidies away from mechanisms that primarily reward existing wealth and toward policies that support asset building for households that have been excluded from prior gains. That can include redesigning credits, strengthening refundability, and targeting benefits to first-time or disadvantaged savers and homeowners in ways that do not rely solely on high incomes. She also emphasizes the importance of better data, transparent reporting, and enforcement that treats taxpayers fairly while addressing high-end avoidance. The broader message is that the tax code reflects values and can be rewritten to reflect different ones. By combining legal analysis with practical proposals, Brown invites readers to see reform as both technical and moral. Technical because rules can be adjusted, and moral because those adjustments determine which communities are helped to build stability and which are left to struggle. In conclusion, this book is best for readers who want a clear, policy-grounded explanation of why racial wealth gaps persist even when laws appear neutral. It will resonate with taxpayers who sense that the rules reward certain life paths, as well as students, journalists, organizers, and policymakers looking for an accessible bridge between legal doctrine and everyday economics. The benefit is practical and civic. Readers come away better able to interpret headlines about tax cuts, deductions, and credits, and to ask who gains and who is left behind. That understanding can change personal decisions, like how to evaluate housing and retirement advice, and it can strengthen public debate by moving it beyond stereotypes toward measurable outcomes. Compared with similar books on inequality, Brown distinguishes herself by focusing on the tax code as a central engine of disparate wealth building, not just wages or education. She connects specific policy levers to lived experience and then treats reform as achievable, not merely aspirational. If you want a rigorous yet readable argument that links law, money, and racial equity, and you want proposals that feel actionable, this book is worth buying. If you would like to support Dorothy A. Brown, you can buy the book through the Amazon link I've provided in the podcast description. After reading the book, please let me know what you think and share your thoughts. See you around.